So let's get talking on this one. Tonight, I've brought experience and those who are in the know to give us an understanding of what is really happening under the Buhari government. I have a former Minister of Works, Senator Aide Ogunlewe, who was also a former member of the National Assembly. Thank you so much, Senator Ogunlewe, for coming on tonight. And also a former member of the National Assembly, Senator Sani, also joins us from our Abuja studio, and as well as the special advisor to the president on National Assembly matters, Honorable Umar El Yakub. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming tonight. Perhaps I should begin with Honorable El Yakub. Give us a sense of what is happening. Is there a crisis in this government? Because we saw when the National Assembly leadership met with the president came out to say, look, appointees of government must cooperate with members of the National Assembly. But day after day, we're seeing a fallout and face-off between members of executive and the members of National Assembly. Things are not looking well, is it?
Well, thank you very much for having me. And I'm glad you opened by mentioning the directive of Mr. President to not only recognize and appreciate the National Assembly, but also to respect the membership of the National Assembly, i.e., to respect them by appreciating that this relationship, which is also premised on the appreciation of the principle of separation of powers between the various arms of government, has conferred the right of oversight on the National Assembly. And to that extent, of course, when any arm of government, i.e. the judiciary or the executive, are invited in the course of oversight functions by the National Assembly, they ought to respect that invitation and honor that invitation. And what Mr. President said, having been someone that is known to respect the rule of law, to respect the processes, and of course having sworn to defend and protect the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, is standing firm to ensure that there is harmony, of course, but also there are distinct functions that are associated with various arms of government, and each arm is allowed to operate within that right. So what I can tell you is that the National Assembly is exercising its right of oversight by having these committees, be they standing committees, ad hoc committees, be they investigative hearings, or the normal course of oversight, to invite members of the executives, i.e. the MDAs under the executive, for explanation on certain issues. And this is what is happening, and this is what you're seeing. And of course, in your opening also, you haven't stated that you would recognize that the executive had heeded that directive and the answer to the invitations by presenting themselves to the membership of the committees when so invited.
So let me get to Senator Ogunlewe before I go back to Abuja. You are being in both arms of government. What is playing out here? What do you think is the cause?
I think it is the party that is not working well. Under the Constitutional Party, there is what is called a caucus meeting that must be holding every three months, where all these issues will be sorted out. If they call, because every member of the National Assembly, the principal officers are members of that caucus, ministers are members of that caucus, the party chairman, the president is a member, so that we can iron out things. What is playing out, it is incoherence in the APC as a political party. We should not allow this to happen unabated. It is not good for the image of the party. It can be controlled. If you have a party caucus meeting, all these issues can be ironed out. But apparently, they've never called a caucus meeting before.
When you served as a minister, we saw a situation where Senate presidents were removed.
Because there was no caucus meeting.
No. I'm making reference that
yes.
This is perhaps not the worst we've seen, isn't it? Under the Obasanjo government, we had a situation where, in fact, the chairman of the party was removed at some point.
Yes.
We had issues where the Senate president, in the space of 4 years, about 2 or 3 Senate presidents were removed under that government. So, but in the case of the APC now, is it the case only of the party leadership, or the leadership of the party generally?
It is the executive that is always believing that there is no party. If they believe in the party, all these issues can be ironed out within the party caucus. The constitution of the party provides for this avenue. And they must meet regularly to iron out things. Because Nigerians voted for them not to quarrel. All these things they are doing is not to the benefit of the voters. So they must...
Some of the things that are coming out, are they not for the benefit of Nigerians? Because we are hearing humongous amount of money that have been spent, siphoned, and things that are not done right. If they were not fighting, are we going to hear some of these things? Under
Section 85, 86 of the Constitution, that's the position of the Auditor General of the Federation. And all its functions are specified there. They should allow the Auditor General of the Federation to perform their duties. And that is why they put it in the Constitution. There is no need to fight. Just ask the Auditor General of the Federation to go into the matter, and they will now prepare a report for the National Assembly.
Before I go to Senator Shehu Sani, I know you may not be biased here because you served in both arms of government. Which arm of government under the Buhari administration is overstepping its bounds?
It is the executive that is not coordinating enough. The executive has responsibility to coordinate for the party. And it's provided in concern of the party caucus, so that everybody will sit down together. Then they will iron out all these things instead of going to flex muscle. Who is the National Assembly? Who is the executive? Who is the legislature? It's not good for us.
Honorable El Yakub is the one that's supposed to be advising the president on that matter. I'll allow him to respond to it because that's your job. You are supposed to make sure that there is no quarrel between the National Assembly and the executive arm of government. But before I come to you, Senator Shehu Sani, when you were in the National Assembly, the 8th Assembly was accused of frustrating the efforts of the executive. And that a lot of fears some of you had was that this 9th Assembly was going to be a rubber stamp. Did they disappoint you?
Well, thank you, Shewin, for having me. Well, first of all, a clarification has to be made. The National Assembly or the Parliament is not a unit or a department of the executive arm of government. It is an independent arm of government recognized by the Constitution and by the laws of the country. And as such, it is expected to perform its function as an organ of government independently in the spirit of separation of powers. But what is happening today differs from what had happened during our time. During our time, we clearly stated by our action, by our word, and by our conduct that nobody can dictate to us what to do and how to do it. We are an independent arm of government, and we performed our function objectively and also held the executive arm to account. What is happening today is unfortunate because you can see an increasing disobedience and disrespect for the National Assembly by a section of the executive arm. And I think it is a clear message that the covenant of loyalty that exists between the National Assembly and the executive is clearly showing some sign of weakness. And once you demonstrated as a parliamentarian that you are there to do the job of the executive, to hook, line, and sinker, to be obsequious, to be subservient, you are bound to lose respect by different heads of ministries, departments, and agencies. And I think this is actually what is happening. So it is for the National Assembly to muster the courage to assert itself, and if harmony needs to be made, there should be an intervention of the party. But I think part of this problem, as clearly stated by Senator Ogunlewe, has to do with the malfunction in the party. I believe perhaps the crisis in the party as it exists made it impossible for the party to be able to harmonize those of them on the other side of the executive and those of them in the National Assembly. And we are bound to see these things grow in as much as the executive arm, elements within the executive arm continue to show disrespect for the parliament. There will certainly continue to be disruptions, and it is incumbent on the party to intervene and to harmonize things. During our time, there were crises, problems between National Assembly and the ruling party.
National Assembly and the executive arm, and the party also at the executive arm of government. But this time around, for people who have decided to unconditionally support, accept, stamp whatever the president has presented before them, there ought not to be conflict. But there is bound to be conflict because the heads or parastatals of government, once they see a parliament that is subservient, that has perhaps surrendered its own independence, there will bound to be disrespect, and this is what we are having now.
Let me put this to you. There were those who believe, and at some point we had this conversation about the possibility or the fears that this Ninth Assembly might just be a rubber stamp parliament of the executive. Is it a rubber stamp from your own point of view?
Well, every session of the parliament has its own challenges and focus and the realities of its own time. So the idea of rubber stamp comes from the fact that they perhaps wanted to be different from what we were, because we have been seen to be belligerent and combative to the executive. So they form for themselves a new spirit of acting in harmony with the executive. And once you say you are acting in harmony with the executive, as it is, certainly you will have your own label. And we had our own label, and I believe this is the label which they have. But it is left for them to prove that they were not rubber stamp.
What is the label?
The parliament is supposed not to be a rubber stamp. Yes.
What is the label?
Huh?
You said they have a label, and what is that label?
What did you mention now?
I asked if this Ninth Assembly is a rubber stamp parliament. Are they?
Well, it is, as far as I'm concerned, it is for Nigerians to judge. But I, as a former member of the parliament, I can only speak of our own time. But it is for them to write themselves, their names in gold or in the mud on where they stand in terms of independence and the sacrosanctity of the National Assembly as an organ of government.
Right. So let me go to Honorable Yakubu, because the role of the job of Honorable Yakubu is to ensure that the president is well advised in the situation of the National Assembly. But Senator Ogunlewe here said that, look, there seems to be some disorganization from the party leadership point of view. What is happening? Is it because of the situation that there is a caretaker committee, or your party had a crisis before now, that this is happening?
Well, let me start by respectfully disagreeing with the distinguished senator concerning the relationship, which he also mentioned is harmonious. I believe the membership of the National Assembly were elected to serve the Nigerian people. So also is the president who heads the executive arm of government. And to work for Nigerians, there was, and indeed there is always going to be a need for that kind of harmonious relationship, which had been in existence from the beginning of the Ninth Assembly. And there are so many benefits and successes recorded because of that relationship. And I assure you that the executive arm of government, not only does it respect and recognizes the National Assembly as an independent arm of government, but we don't see them as rubber stamp, and of course have not been acting as rubber stamp. I'll give you instances. First of all, it's not that whenever the president brings anything to the National Assembly, it's being approved as suggested. The first budget of 2020, before the reviewed budget, was tinkered with by the National Assembly, and the president assented to it as passed by the National Assembly. The recent review of the budget will also be tinkered both on the revenue side and the expenditure side by the National Assembly. And the president assented to what was passed, not what he presented. And I'm sure you would also remember that even prior to that budget of 2020, the president gave a directive in recognition and respect for the National Assembly that no minister should travel out of this country and during the budget processes, so that he would be represented, he would represent his ministry, during the process of budget scrutiny. So many instances are bound to show that this relationship is based on respect and recognition. And of course, engagement. There had been continuous engagement between the executive arm and the legislature on so many fronts, on government policies, on budgets, on the palliatives, on what has gone into the MTEV and all other factors of running the government. So to say that the legislature just approves whatever the president or the executive brings is not entirely true.
All right.
Why
so,
there is this? Because of
Honorable Yakub, apologies to cut in. Yeah, just a moment. We'll go for a breather. And when we come back, we'll be asking you, when you say there is a harmonious relationship between the National Assembly and the executive, things don't look exactly like that, because some Nigerians will say that, in fact, the opposite is happening. There is chaos between both arms of government, and the facts speak for themselves. We come back and analyze this. Don't forget, only yesterday, the Senate said that the service chief should be removed or sacked. But the presidency reacted. We dissect more of those issues after this break. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. For those the critics of the Buhari government, they say the center is no longer holding, and in fact, there is chaos under this government. How true is that? So Senator Aide Ogunlewe experience in the National Assembly and in the executive, and as well, we're getting experience from Senator Sani, and we are getting reactions from Honorable Umar Yakubu, who is the SSA to the President on National Assembly matters. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for coming. Let me get, before I allow Senator Ogunlewe to come in, Honorable Yakub, when you say there is a harmonious relationship, one day the president said, every appointee of mine who goes to the National Assembly should respect them. 2 days or 3 days later, Senator Godswill Akpabio had a very turbulent moment with the National Assembly, and afterwards they gave a 48-hour ultimatum for him to release the names of those he accused. Yesterday, it was the turn of Senator Chris Ngige, who is the Minister of Labour. We have also heard the reaction of the National Assembly on Mr. Festus Keyamo and the Special Works Program. When you say there is a harmonious relationship, it does look at the definition as changing the dictionary.
No, the definition has certainly not changed. What you are seeing is, like I have mentioned earlier, Mr. President's appreciation of the independence of the legislature, and having directed everyone in his government to honor invitation and respect calls by the National Assembly, one can attest to the fact that they are honoring the invitation and they are indeed respecting the call. As to what happens in the engagement, it's not something that Mr. President intends to dictate how the legislature runs its affairs. And that in itself shows the independence and the fact that they are not being teleguided, nor are their proceedings being teleguided by the executive. So to that extent, one would appreciate the fact that, they honor the invitation, they respected the National Assembly, and of course, in their oversight functions, the National Assembly had raised questions to these ministers, and how they responded and how the engagement goes about is not teleguided by anybody, because there are questions raised and there are answers being given by the members of the executive, in this case, the two ministers you mentioned. And how the proceeding goes, the fact that it's not being guided by the president or anybody outside that room, it means that it's an engagement based on each one's position or right to defend themselves and their right to ask these questions. Clearly, the National Assembly has the right of oversight functions, and in their oversight functions, they have the right to invite members of the government.
Honorable Yakub, let me bring in Senator Ogunlewe back into the conversation. Senator Ogunlewe, you heard, sorry, Honorable Yakub, let me allow Senator Ogunlewe to get into the conversation. You heard what Honorable Yakub said. Is there harmony in this government?
It is clear that there is none because of the style of leadership of Mr. President. Mr. President is the national leader of the party, and he cannot just look and then the party members behaving as if they don't have the mandate of the people to govern this country.
Has the president lost the grip?
No, I don't say so. We are an underdeveloped country. We expect us to be, not to be where we are today. But this is not what they voted for. They voted for progress. They voted for welfare of the people. They voted for security. Let somebody be in charge.
Are you saying the president is not in charge?
He's in charge, but I'm saying let somebody be
politically speaking now. That's what I'm asking.
No, I'm saying this is not what people voted for. They voted for progress. People are hungry. People have no jobs. Then all these things they are doing, to my mind, it is not in the interest of the people. There
is a columnist, a writer who gave, it's almost a week now, who said, Mr. President, take charge. Is that admonition a right one?
No. Let us encourage Mr. President. His background is military. This is democracy. The more consultation you do, the better for the country. Call everybody together and read the Arrow Act. They are members of your party. It is not the opposition that is causing problem now. It is the members of APC that are causing problems for Mr. President. So you must call them to order.
So, Senator, when you see members of the executive pointing accusing fingers in the public hearing that we have seen, we saw one yesterday, and we saw one day before yesterday, when ministers are saying members of the parliament are fingered in the corruption process, bedeviling an MDA of government. Where do we go from here?
It is pure indiscipline. Somebody must discipline somebody. If you make that kind of, conclusion, you must be able to prove it. But that is not what is of interest to Nigerians. Nigerians are fed up. They want to eat. They want jobs. We have families, 5 of them graduates. They have no jobs. This is not what they voted for. Somebody must take charge.
Who do you think can fix this?
It's Mr. President.
Can someone advise or help him in this regard?
The buck stop on his table. They voted for him because of that purpose. That is why we have a presidential system. It's not a parliamentary system where there is collective responsibility. Right. It is one person that is responsible to all of us, and he must act.
Is this a failure of the APC?
No. You see, we are advising on the television because of your own experience. Tell what you feel must be done.
Okay. Let me bring Senator Sani here. Weigh in, if you may, in one breath. The National Assembly says service chiefs should be sacked. The presidency said, look, you cannot just tell us that. It's the prerogative of the president to do that. And that's not the first time we are hearing that. And you saw what happened in the public hearing. What exactly do you think is happening, and what is the way forward?
Well, the job of the service chief is to lead a security apparatus that will protect the people and defend the country. But they have failed. Our people are being killed every day from Borno State to Katsina, Zamfara, Niger, Kaduna, and several other places, Benue and Co. So if they have consistently failed to do that, it is time to have new people with fresh ideas and new ideas that will take charge and address the problems that is threatening to consume our country. So the National Assembly is right. They should go. Because
does not seem to agree with that.
Their best is not good enough.
Senator Sani,
yes.
The president does not seem to agree with that. The statement coming from the presidency does not seem to be in that direction. He doesn't think they should go just yet.
It is democracy, but I believe that you should understand that once the country continue to falter, people are being killed, it is not the legacy of the service chiefs that is under question. It is his own. When he is out of office someday, nobody will remember the name of the chief of air staff, chief of naval staff, chief of army staff. It is the president that will be blamed. So when people say change the service chief, they still like the president. And I believe that they love the country most, and the president should listen to that and bring in new people with new ideas, fresh ideas that will address the security challenges that is consuming.
Let's close the program now, Senator Sani, and let me allow Honorable Yakub in 20 seconds, and I'll get 20 seconds also from Senator Sani. Where do we go from here? It does look like a lot of people are losing hope in the way and manner things have played out in the last few days. 20 seconds. Where do we go from here, Honorable Yakub?
I certainly would not lose hope, and I believe the president is in charge, is in full control of the affairs of this country. And if you look at all the issues being discussed, even the ones mentioned in this program, has something to do with service to the Nigerian people, for which the president has stood firm on. When you look at the issue of Honorable Minister of State Keyamo and the 774,000 jobs to be created across the country, the president said this policy would go on and Nigerians will be
all right. So we need to, yeah.
And said,
let me get Senator Ogunlewe's 20 seconds final word.
Mr. President, you have to be in charge. They voted for him. They didn't vote for any other person than him. The trust of Nigerians on Mr. President was unbelievable. And he shouldn't allow us to feel that we misplace our judgment.
Is that trust still there?
No, he must take it. He must take charge, as far as I'm concerned.
I'm
Because at the end of the day, it is his government.
I must sincerely thank you, Senator Aide Ogunlewe, former Minister of Works, and former Senator Shehu Sani. Thank you so much for your thought, and Honorable Yakub, thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us tonight and sharing your thought.